It's Halloween time again, which means it's time that we revisit what's rapidly becoming a Halloween classic. None other than Patrick McHale's miniseries, Over the Garden Wall. Since 2013, we've enjoyed coming back time and time again to Wirt and Gregory's journey. And every time it's been just as whimsical and creepy as the first time we ever set foot into the dense forests of the Unknown. Now, there's been a lot of discussion in the past regarding what exactly the Unknown could be, with most people being satisfied to assume that it's either literally or metaphorically purgatory or the afterlife. Even Cartoon Conspiracy has taken a look at this before, but what's been a little more ambiguous to people is the nature of the incredibly creepy beast that follows Wirt, Gregory, and Jason Funderburker throughout the series. Fun fact, incredibly creepy is actually the beast's middle name. Many people have thought the beast could be a manifestation of something like death or the devil, but there are other theories that suggest that there might be some other folklore that's more applicable to it, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. There's one specific theory that asks, could the beast actually be a Wendigo of native folklore? And are there any other cryptids that might also fit the bill? So first off, there's going to be some pretty vaguely heavy spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen Over the Garden Wall yet, this is the perfect time of year to do so. Also, if you haven't done so, it's fantastic, so please go do so. With that warning out of the way, we now need to establish the theory itself, which means we have to take a look at what Wendigos are and how they're usually portrayed in media. While the Wendigo may not get all that much airtime in popular culture, they're still pretty terrifying beasts. Originating from Algonquian folklore of Northeast America, as well as sizable parts of Canada, the Wendigo is an evil spirit that bears the resemblance of a human, but possesses traits associated with cultural taboos. Things like greed, murder, and most notably, cannibalism. And often these traits are directly related to one another. It's unpleasant. What's even more unpleasant is that it's possible through committing these acts, especially cannibalism, for a human to be overcome by spirits and become a Wendigo themselves, always in search of their next victim. Now, getting to Over the Garden Wall, there are two major things we need to take a look at. First, can we find out exactly where the series takes place and relate that to where Wendigo supposedly appear? And second, how closely does the beast match the Wendigo both in appearance and in demeanor? So let's look at the setting. Just by looking at the aesthetic of the show, you can tell it's pretty steeped in Americana from all different time periods. And in episode 9, Into the Unknown, we see Wirt and Gregory's hometown, which looks to be a peaceful, unassuming town that could really serve as anywhere in 1990s America. But if we take a look at some of the iconography that's used throughout the show, we might actually be able to get more specific. If you take a look at the winged skull that is often associated with the show, most notably in the opening title card, you might actually start to see it popping up in other places as well, particularly on the headstones that Wirt and Greg hide behind when spying on their peers in episode 9. The winged skull is a well-known symbol that was frequently used on gravestones of the 16th and 17th centuries, especially in the colonies of New England. If we extrapolate from this, we can actually suggest that Over the Garden Wall takes place somewhere in New England. That is to say, in the northeastern United States, which falls nicely into where the myth of the Wendigo was popularized. Alright, now it's the beast's turn to be compared to the Wendigo. In media, the portrayal of the Wendigo varies, but certain sources maintain certain constants. If you look at things like Dungeons & Dragons, or World of Warcraft, or even Marvel Comics, they're either portrayed as either large, hulking, lanky creatures, or large, hulking, Yeti-like creatures, usually with some protruding horns or antlers atop their head. The beast, with his antlers and imposing presence, certainly seems to qualify so far. The Wendigo in folklore is also an ever-present threat in the woods, always lurking in the shadows, poising to either strike or corrupt the minds of those who wander aimlessly, targeting those who are getting weaker all the time. Again, the beast seems to fit this pretty well with how he stalks our heroes throughout Over the Garden Wall. But if we look at the one time we saw the beast's unsilhouetted form, there's one major thing we see that might not fit as well, that being that he appears to be made out of edelwood, which would seem to go against the whole Wendigo theory since they're not usually portrayed as being made of wood. But this stylistic choice may actually be a clever workaround to show cannibalism without being, you know, as unpleasant as things would be when you expect cannibalism to be involved. We can see that the way the beast operates is that he turns his victims into edelwood trees, so that the woodsman can chop them down and fuel the lantern that keeps the beast alive. Considering that many Wendigo were considered to once be human, and that cannibalism, even if it means your own survival, is one of the biggest factors when it comes to turning, is it unfair to say that the beast could be a human-turned Wendigo who now depends on consuming other humans in the name of self-preservation? As enticing as this theory sounds, there's a few big problems with it, and one of the biggest ones is, weirdly enough, the physical description. There are a lot of factors that perpetuate the Wendigo as a Yeti, Bigfoot kind of creature. Like the aforementioned games and comics, and to a lesser extent Algernon Blackwood's novel, The Wendigo. And it also just makes sense that a beast commonly associated with the northern US and Canada would take on the form of something like a Yeti or a Bigfoot, right? But according to Algonquian and Aboriginal folklore, the Wendigo actually looks pretty strikingly different from this. In most accounts, the Wendigo is described as being tall and abnormally thin, with rotting yellow flesh, sharp teeth or fangs, and glowing sunken eyes. Call me crazy, but matched with their association with cannibalism, that sounds to me a lot more like our modern day interpretation of a zombie. And considering the beast still has some form of mental capacity and is able to manipulate people and strike deals with them, at this point it seems like he doesn't take entirely after a Wendigo after all. That's not to say that it's entirely wrong, however, either. I mean, look into the beast's eyes and tell me they don't glow. But the sheer amount of differences in the beast's appearance compared to a traditional description of a Wendigo makes me wonder, are there any other monsters or creatures we can take a look at that might fill in some of the gaps of the design of the beast? Because, as it turns out, there's no shortage of creatures or cryptids wandering the woods waiting to cause trouble. But whatever's out there and how much it differs from a Wendigo all depends on who you ask. We could start anywhere really, but let's go with the obvious. Many people have compared the beast to Satan in the past for a few obvious reasons. He has those pretty prominent horns, he strikes deals with people not unlike in the German legend of Faust. Matched with the overall, possibly afterlife-y feel of Over the Garden Wall, this interpretation of the beast seems to be a pretty good fit. But what can we learn from mythologies elsewhere in the world? And there's actually quite a bit to look at. In Celtic mythology, for example, there's Cernunnos, or Cernunnos, the horned god of Celtic paganism. The idea of a horned god is actually much bigger than Cernunnos himself, associating with many different gods and deities all over the world, including in Greek mythology and very prominently in Wicca and other forms of neo-paganism. But if we go with the history of the horned god, we're gonna be here all day, so for the purposes of this video, we're just gonna stick with Cernunnos. Or Cernunnos. In basic terms, Cernunnos is, among other things, a god of life, animals, and the underworld. If Over the Garden Wall did indeed take place in some sort of bridge between life and death, seems only natural for a god of both of those to be wandering around. Cernunnos is also commonly portrayed as being humanoid but possessing the antlers of a stag, which, as we've already established, is one of the beast's signature features, though it's debatable if his antlers are those of a stag or if they're just made of edelwood. Keeping Cernunnos in mind, there's also the matter of Herne the Hunter, a mythological figure in English folklore who is suggested in some writings to have a very strong connection to Cernunnos, some suggesting that their mythology may have actually been derived from the same ancient ancestor. And physically, this makes sense as Herne is frequently depicted with these antlers. Not only that, but he's also said to be a keeper of the forest. But Cernunnos and Herne are far from the only forest protectors that share a lot of similarities with the beast. Take, for example, the Leshy of Slavic folklore, which are known to be masculine humanoid forest spirits, with hair and beards made from living vines and the grass of the forest. They also have the ability to shapeshift, oftentimes being indistinguishable from the surrounding trees. That is, apart from their piercing, glowing eyes. And their retellings and interpretations make them pretty hard to place on the morality spectrum. Some sources claim Leshy to be protectors of the forest, while others claim they're mischievous tricksters who have been known to tickle people to death, which, now that I've said that out loud, that would probably be the worst way to die imaginable. However, other sources claim Leshy are a bit more sinister. Some accounts say that Leshy are responsible for leading travelers astray and abducting children. Now, to be fair, the theme of abducting and preying on children is for some reason not that uncommon in most folklore, but still, where have we seen something similar to this before? Lastly, let's take a quick trip back to America and take a look at one of the fathers of eldritch horror, none other than H.P. Lovecraft. Throughout this author's career, he built a sprawling mythos which has only expanded over time, with more and more writers interpreting his works even today. Arguably, the beast most associated with him would be Cthulhu, but we're going to instead take a look at a great old one known as Aelith, also known as the Widow in the Woods. Not much is known of Aelith, but she's described as being a tall, shadowy humanoid with yellow glowing eyes and protrusions like the branches of dead trees. Based on that description and that name, it seems almost like a perfect match for the beast. Moreover, Aelith herself himself is also the servant of the deity Shub-Niggurath, who is frequently associated with and referred to as the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young. There isn't much information about Shub-Niggurath's physical form, but it could stand to reason that the many faces that cover the beast's body could be representative of this idea, the 1,000 young being the beast's young victims rather than something like followers. Maybe the Unknown had a bit more H.P. Lovecraft inspiration than we once thought. Based on what we've taken a look at here today, there's definitely a lot to think about when considering if the beast is a Wendigo, especially considering the connection the show maintains with its American roots. It seems almost undeniable that the beast was, at least in part, inspired by the Wendigo, but it seems much more likely that the beast is actually a combination of many different monsters, cryptids, and deities from all around the world. And all of these ideas have combined to form a uniquely unsettling being that will remain timeless and strike fear into our hearts every Halloween. So keeping all these creatures in mind on the plausibility of being a Wendigo, I'm going to give this conspiracy 3.5 Edelwood burning lanterns out of 5. But what do you think? Do you think the beast could be a Wendigo, or do you think there's another mythical creature that we didn't discuss that you think the beast could have been based on? Also, what's the best rock fact you can come up with? Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to let us know of any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in the future. Until then, have a happy Halloween, and be safe. Try not to get lost in the unknown when you go out at night.